What's up, tennis fans? Sleepy Picks here. We're going to take a little detour today and take a look at the March Madness college basketball bracket. We're going to look at each of the individual matchups and hopefully help you make some picks. Let's get started. Before we get started, quick note, this is probably going to be a very long video. We got a lot of games to go through. So if you're looking for a particular game, I'll have chapters in the description. You can just click on those. It'll take you right to the game. If you're just looking for the picks, once we're done with each region, I'm going to post all my picks in the bracket, so you can just click on that chapter as well. Let's take a look at the East region. Look at the East region bracket. This is a pretty stacked bracket. I know everyone's been saying, you got St. John's as a 5 seed, you got Kansas as a 4 seed, they got Darian Peterson, then you got Uconn over as a 2 seed, and they were basically in the discussion until that final game against St. John's. If they had won that, they might have been able to sneak in as a 1 seed. So kind of a tricky bracket for Duke, but let's take a look at the first matchup. Let's take a look at the first matchup. We have the number 1 overall seed, Duke Blue Devils, playing the number 16 seed, Siena Saints. This matchup is set to tip off at 2:50 on Thursday in Greenville, South Carolina. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of Duke fans there. Let's take a look at Duke's resume first. They come in 32-2 on the year, 17-1 in conference, just coming off a 74-70 win over Virginia in the ACC tournament. John Shire, in his 4th year here at Duke, brought in a very, very star-studded freshman class led by Cameron Boozer, who is one of the best players in the nation. The Duke defense has improved every year under Shire. It is now number 1 in defensive efficiency. And, that's not to say that the defense was bad under Coach K. Obviously, Coach K had some teams with very solid defense, but we're talking now a Duke team that has consistently had top 5 defenses year in and year out. And when you're looking at picking a team to go deep in a tournament, that's exactly what you're looking for, because inevitably there are going to be moments where the offense might go dry for a few minutes, and you want the defense to be able to hold the team. So, huge improvement there. As we mentioned before, only 2 losses on the year. One was on a neutral court to Texas Tech, and this game was controlled by Duke almost the whole time. They lose by 1, kind of, again, very similar to that Houston loss, 70-67 in the Final Four. Just kind of fumbling at the end of the game, allowing Texas Tech to get a game winner there. And then something very similar in the North Carolina game. Obviously, this is a rivalry game. Tough to put a lot of weight into it. They lose at North Carolina. The game was tied. North Carolina gets a 3-point buzzer beater. There was 0.03 seconds on the clock for Duke, but they weren't able to do anything there. So North Carolina gets a 3-point win there. Obviously, Duke getting the revenge, 76-61 later on. Looking at the Siena Saints, they were able to win the MAC tournament over the number 1 seeded Merrimack, and Siena was 0-2 against Merrimack going into that. It was really interesting to see. So Merrimack is known in the MAC for having a very strong zone defense. That kind of makes you struggle to hit comfortable shots and everything. And Jerry McNamara is the head coach of Siena College, and he was able to produce an offense that frustrated that Merrimack zone. And we saw it a little bit in the second matchup, and then finally in the third matchup, it was able to just dominate, and Siena gets a 10-point win there coming out. And let's keep in mind, too, Jerry McNamara, obviously we know Syracuse great, won the title with Carmelo Anthony. Syracuse just fired their head coach. So there might be a little bit of distractions there. Obviously he's been asked in the press conferences whether he's been tabbed as the next Syracuse head coach. But that's definitely something for us to keep an eye on there. Now, looking at this matchup, obviously, we have a Duke team that's top 5 in offensive efficiency, top 5 in defensive efficiency. We have a Siena team that has only played one quad 1 matchup, and that was against Indiana, at Indiana, and Siena lost by 21 points. And honestly, that game wasn't even as close as 21. There are some points, I believe, where Siena was down by almost 30. So, not very promising. This Siena team plays a very slow tempo, so they're going to be looking to really slow Duke down. Now, with the athletes that Duke has, it's going to be very difficult to do something like that. But Siena does play a small amount of possessions. So I don't see this being like a high scoring game. I don't see Siena getting more than probably 55 points. In my opinion, I think this is going to be Duke by 20 or 25 points here. So let's pick Duke to advance to the next round. Next matchup, we have the number 8 seeded Ohio State Buckeyes playing the number 9 seeded TCU Horned Frogs. This game is going to tip off at 12:15 on Thursday, and it will also be in Greenville, South Carolina. And honestly, guys, kind of happy this game's going off early. I don't think this is going to be a really fun game. Maybe it's going to be interesting at the end, but Ohio State just doesn't play exciting basketball. A lot of these games, like hopefully the night games, we'll see a few more exciting teams, but Ohio State they're extremely efficient. They do what they need to do. They're not a very flashy team. Able to go 12-8 in the Big Ten, 21-12 overall. They have Jake Diebler, who is their head coach. It's his second year, and in just 2 years, he's able to get the Buckeyes back to the tournament since 2022. But this team isn't that big. They don't have fast guard play. They're just extremely efficient. There's not really much else I can say here. Number 42 in offensive efficiency, number 83 in defensive efficiency, and 4-11 in quad 1 wins, which isn't great. But if you look a little bit deeper, a lot of these games are very, very close. And this is a team in Ohio State that's kind of been knocking on the door, maybe. If we can see if they beat TCU, then maybe they can get out. Maybe they can challenge Duke. But, this is a team that was able to play Michigan in their last game to 4 points. And they didn't even look that pretty. 14 from 34 from the field, 8 from 24 from 3. And you think, how are they playing a 4-point game? Again, guys, they're just a very clean team. They play smart basketball. They do what they need to do, and they don't commit stupid mistakes. Now, looking at this TCU team, they are 22-11 overall, 11-7 in conference, and they are led by Jamie Dixon, who is their head coach in his 10th season. We remember Jamie Dixon from Pitt way back when. And this team has a few more flashier wins. They had that 4-point loss to Michigan early on in the season, but they were able to beat Florida, who we see now as the number 1 seed, 84-80. And this seems a little bit more explosive, I feel, offensively. 87 in offensive efficiency, 34 in defensive efficiency, 6-7 in their quad 1 wins. So almost 500 there. They've been able to kind of get over the hump and win some of those bigger games. Guys, all the numbers are telling me right now to take Ohio State, but my eyes, I feel like I really like TCU in this matchup. I feel like they're going to be able to kind of pick up the tempo a little bit, play a little bit faster on this Ohio State team. Again, Ohio State doesn't have the athletes to keep up with TCU. I mean, they definitely don't have the athletes to keep up with a team like Duke if they get through. But I'm gonna pick TCU to get through. I'll say they win by 5. Our next matchup is the number 5 seeded St. John's Red Storm playing the number 12 seeded Northern Iowa Panthers. This game is set to tip at 7:10 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday in San Diego, California. Obviously, we know that the fans of St. John's will travel. They should have a pretty good fan base there. It'll be interesting to see if Northern Iowa also will have some fans traveling for them as well. Looking first at St. John's, they are 28-6 on the year, 18-2 in the Big East. They're coming off this big win over Uconn in the Big East Finals, 72-52. And that was a little bit of a revenge game. They did lose 72-40 at Uconn on the 25th of February. So we knew that there was going to be a little bit of revenge in the finals. We didn't know it was going to be by 20 points. So extremely impressive for St. John's to get through that, get their second straight victory in the Big East tournament and also deny UConn any possibility of getting a number 1 seed. St. John's is led by Rick Pitino. This is his 3rd year here, and he brought in a pretty good class of transfers. I think one of the goals here for him was to get a little bit more offense and a little bit more offensive efficiency out of this team, because we remember the one thing that they struggled with in that 2025 tournament, they came in red hot off that Big East conference title and tournament win. People were picking them. They came in as a 2 seed. People were picking them to go all the way to the Final Four. And they lost second round disappointingly to Arkansas, who was the number 10 seed, 75-66. And credit to Pitino, he's able to go out, get a few good transfers. This team is now sitting at 43rd in offensive efficiency, 10th in defensive efficiency. They're quad 1 wins. They're 5-5. Quad 2, they're 11-0. Quad 3, they're 9-1. And the reason why I bring up the quad 3 is because their one loss was to Providence, and this was at home. They lose 77-71. And the reason I bring that up is because I really do think that Northern Iowa can kind of do something similar to what Providence was able to do. Now, St. John's was not shooting well that night, 13 of 40 from 2-point and 7 of 31 from 3-point. And now they play a Northern Iowa team. Let's get into this Northern Iowa team here. This is a team that has been riddled with injuries almost the entire year, but they get healthy at the right time. They play a stifling defense, a very slow pace, and I think that's really going to bother St. John's. We have a Northern Iowa team, 150 in offensive efficiency, but 25 in defensive efficiency. They are 3rd in 3-point defense. That is extremely troubling for a team like St. John's. St. John's not living and dying by the 3, but they're not going to get some of these kind of like bigger shots that are going to allow them to pull away from a team like Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa is 0-2 in quad 1 wins, 4-5 in quad 2, and 7-5 in quad 3. Their 2 quad 1 matchups, they lost 63-58 to St. Mary's and 91-86 to Belmont. And one thing that I think is promising, obviously, St. Mary's also plays a very slow pace as well. So that 63-58 isn't really surprising. Tough back and forth game there. But then they play Belmont, who likes to play a faster pace. And Northern Iowa, number one, concerning that they weren't able to hold Belmont really. Belmont able to score 91 points. But interestingly enough, Northern Iowa able to get 86 points out of that matchup. So they're able to kind of run a little bit if they have to. I really do feel like this Northern Iowa team is going to cause some problems. I don't think they beat St. John's. I think this is just a tricky matchup for St. John's, and it's a little bit frustrating. You see the other 12 seeds like High Point, like Mcneese. I think those teams St. John's would have been able to dispatch up pretty quickly. This Northern Iowa team, I think, is just gonna muck up this game and make it a really gross game. I think we're gonna see something very similar to the way that Providence played them, but also the way that Seton Hall plays them, where you never get in a comfortable offensive rhythm. And if Northern Iowa can hit their shots, they'll be able to hang around. But I think St. John's is going to get through this matchup. I'm going to go with St. John's. I'll say they win by 6. Next matchup, we have the number 4 Kansas Jayhawks playing the number 13 Cal Baptist Lancers. This game is set to tip at 9:45 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday in San Diego, California. And this is our first matchup where the game is pretty close to the campus of Cal Baptist. It's about an hour and a half drive. We know California traffic, so maybe it's about a 2-hour drive. But extremely interesting to see if they do bring in a lot of fans. And for some reason, I always feel like Kansas gets the short end of the stick with these games where they're playing a lower ranked team, but the lower ranked team is closer in proximity to the location of the game. And I don't know. I just always feel like this happens to Kansas for some strange reason. So let's take a look at Kansas first. 23-10 overall, 12-6 in the Big 12. They have one of the best players in the nation, and the one question that's always going to come up for us every time we talk about Kansas is how many minutes is Darian Peterson going to play? He's been on a load management schedule. He signals to Bill Self when he wants to come out of the game. So this is a big question because this is now we're in the nitty gritty of the season. This is the tournament. Every game matters. So obviously we assume that Darian Peterson's going to play the whole time. In 2025, Kansas lost in the first round to Arkansas, the number 10 seed, 79-72, and that wasn't really one of Bill Self's best teams. He did have a lot of talent, but the talent was kind of like a little bit at each other's throats. They weren't really getting along or gelling as a team, so they just weren't able to overcome that and win a round. I think they're going to be able to win a round here. But let's talk a little bit about Cal Baptist. So this team won the MAC tournament. Dominic Daniels is the player of the year. He plays on this team. Cal Baptist able to beat the number 1 seed at Utah Valley State. Comes down. Dominic Daniels hits a buzzer beater. He didn't look great the whole game. I think he only had like 23 points. But a lot of those points were scored towards the end of the game. And Cal Baptist was trailing a lot of the time, but able to come back and win that and get into the tournament. The one thing that concerns me the most with this matchup is Bill Self is so good at isolating the best player. So obviously we know Daniels is the best player on Cal Baptist. Bill Self is so good at just taking that player out of the game completely, like using defensive schemes to force everyone else on the team to score. Basically saying like, we're going to give you a lot of these open shots, take them, because we don't want Dominic Daniels to take them. And that's what really, when I saw this matchup came up, I was just like, of course it's got to be this one, because I was really hoping that Daniels was going to be able to make a name for himself here in the NCAA tournament. But I think he's going to be silenced a little bit here. Although we do always see some instances where, a player might not have a great game in the conference tournament, and then all of a sudden they just step out. Like that's all they're thinking about this week is like, God, I can't wait to get back out on the court and really play. And maybe that's the way he's approached. But I know Bill Self is going to have defensive schemes to push this team to the limit and really make them score without their best player. Do I think that they're going to be able to do that? No. I think Kansas is probably going to win this game by 10 to 15 points. So give me Kansas to advance. I'll say they win by 12. Next game is the number 6 seed at Louisville Cardinals playing the number 11 seed at South Florida Bulls. This game is set to tip Thursday at 1:30 Eastern Time in Buffalo, New York. Obviously, not very close to either campus, so it will be interesting to see the fan turnout here. Let's start with Louisville. They are 23-10 overall, 11-7 in the ACC. They are led by Pat Kelsey. This is his second year with Louisville and second straight year of leading them to an NCAA tournament. However, Kelsey is 0-5 in the NCAA tournament. That includes his losses with his other two schools, Charleston and Winthrop. In 2025, Louisville came in as the number 8 seed, and they lost 89-75 to the number 9 Creighton Blue Jays. Kelsey has added a couple of high-rated shooting guards. However, we do have that injury to Michael Brown, and we got to keep an eye on that. It's a lower back injury. Obviously, these guys are going to do everything they can to get back and play, but with a lower back injury, it is a little bit concerning that he might not be able to play the full minutes, the full load, and he's one of their best, if not their best, player on the team. So without him, it's going to be a much tougher road for them. They did play the ACC tournament without him, losing to Miami. Looking at this South Florida team, they like to play a faster pace. They're able to get through the American Athletic Conference. They kind of cruised to a victory in this tournament, beating Charlotte 86-64 and Wichita State 70-55. They're on an 11-game winning streak. Now, obviously, Louisville's going to be the best team that they've seen since probably Alabama back in December. So that is a little bit concerning. They haven't really played this high level, and Louisville's kind of been seeing some higher level competition week in and week out. So that is always concerning, kind of looking at these matchups. South Florida was able to play Alabama. They lost 104-93. They are 2-3 in quad 1 wins, 6-2 in quad 2 wins, and 7-3 in quad 3 wins. This team is 67th with their offensive efficiency, 44th with their defensive efficiency. So very interesting. The one thing that I really like about this UCF team is there are a lot of Power 5 level guys, Power 5 level athletes that are just playing in that mid-major level. So I think this is their time to kind of step up, and maybe some of these guys might be looking for opportunities to transfer as well. So I think this is going to be a big step up game for them. I like the pace that they play. I like the athleticism that they bring to the core, and I do worry about the injuries plaguing Louisville. So I'm going to pick South Florida to win this. I'm going to say it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a pretty close game. I'll say South Florida wins by 3. Next game, we have the number 3 seeded Michigan State Spartans playing the number 14 seeded North Dakota State Bison. This game is set to tip Thursday at 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time in Buffalo, New York. Not really much to say about the North Dakota State Bison, but let's talk a little bit about Michigan State here. 25-7 on the year, 12-5 in the Big Ten. Tom Izzo just doing an amazing job as a head coach. He didn't return a single double-digit score from last year, and yet here he is again, able to have another really solid basketball team here, seeded number 3 in the tournament. He's able to do this year in and year out, just get the most out of his players. The one thing I will say about this Michigan State team, and it's not something to look out in this matchup, but we definitely want to look out when they play a team that kind of exceeds their level of athleticism. That's where they're going to struggle a little bit. We saw that with Michigan, where Michigan just was able to kind of do whatever they wanted against Michigan State. So we definitely want to look out for that as they start to get deeper into this tournament and play better teams. This North Dakota State team won the Summit League. They're 27-7 overall, 14-2 in the Summit League, so pretty good record there. They're able to get through Oral Roberts in the first round, Nebraska, Omaha in the second round, and then North Dakota in the rivalry game. They win 70-62 to get the automatic bid here. This North Dakota team has not played a quad 1 game. Their quad 2 record is 0-1, quad 3 is 5-4, and then quad 4, which we haven't really talked about much, they're 19-2. So they have just played a much lower schedule here. For me, I just don't see this team posing much of a threat to Michigan State. I think Michigan State's going to be able to score however many they want. It's kind of like a name your number type game for them. I'm going to say they win by 15 points. Next game, we have the number 7 UCLA Bruins playing the number 10 UCF Knights. This game is set to tip Friday at 7:25 in Philadelphia. And I really wanted to pick the UCLA Bruins here. I thought they looked really good in the Big Ten tournament, but unfortunately they sustained a couple of important injuries here. Tyler Bilodeau and Donovan Dent. Bilodeau had a knee strain and Dent had a calf strain. Both are expected to return to the NCAA tournament, but obviously right now, we don't know yet kind of the capacity that they're going to be able to play. Donovan Dent a little bit more important for me, if we're going to pick a team like UCLA to win against UCF. UCLA stressing that next man up mentality, which I think is great, but you kind of need your best guys to make a deep run in this tournament. And originally I thought, watching this UCLA team throughout the season, I thought they really did a great job stepping up in some of these higher level quad one matchups. UCF, on the other hand, they're sitting at 21-11 overall, 9-9 in the Big 12 conference. A little bit surprising that they were able to get into this tournament here as a 10 seed. They're 5-8 in quad one wins, and one of the more concerning things for us here is that they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. So we want to keep that in mind. You know, they lost to Baylor, they lost to Oklahoma State, they lost to West Virginia. All 3 of those teams, non-tournament teams. Then they go and they beat Cincinnati 66-65, which is a nice turnaround. It was an overtime game. But then they lose 81-59 to Arizona. So this team definitely has trouble stepping up. I can't pick UCLA right now with these injuries. I really wanted to, but I'm going to have to pick UCF. I'll say UCF wins by 5. Next game, we have the number 2 seed at Uconn Huskies playing the number 15 seed at Furman Paladins. This game is set to tip at 10 p.m. on Friday. It is in Philadelphia. One of the later games, and honestly, I think the anticipation is going to really lead up for Furman, and UConn is just building and building in their anger right now. They lost that 20-point game to St. John's in the Big East tournament, so we're always looking for like bounce back spots. I think this is going to be a big time bounce back spot. First round, they get a nice team to kind of like beat up on. UConn's been pretty good this year, 29-5 overall, 17-3 in the Big East. Dan Hurley always knows how to get the best out of his teams. You know, obviously he's had some very quality teams, back-to-back national titles a few years ago, but still able to get the best out of his teams. Last year wasn't that strong of a UConn team, but they played Florida, the national champions, down to 2 points, losing in the second round. So always look for Dan Hurley to get the most out of these UConn teams. And obviously UConn coming in as a 2 seed now, they got a lot more talent than last year, so they're going to be a threat here in this bracket. Furman, on the other hand, they're sitting at 22-12 overall, 10-8 in the SoCon, able to get through and win the SoCon tournament, beating the number 1 seed in the finals, East Tennessee State, 76-61. This is going to be Furman, the best team that Furman's seen all year, and I don't really think they're going to have much resistance here. This UConn team, I think, is going to be high-flying, and I'm going to say UConn's going to be able to name their number in this matchup, so give me UConn to win by 25. Here's a look at the East region with my picks. I kind of feel like Duke's going to cruise to the Elite Eight. I don't really see them facing much resistance from either St. John's or Kansas. And I do have a sneaky feeling that Tom Izzo's gonna bring his team through to the Elite Eight to play Duke, and that might be a tricky matchup for them. Izzo always a great coach, being able to kind of figure out those matchups and start to frustrate teams that might be a little bit better than his team. So definitely look out for that. Let's take a look at the next region. I think we'll get a better sense of how a lot of these teams look after the first round. You know, it's always tough to look at these teams with their numbers because they're based on a lot of their conference matchups, which they've been playing for the last 2 months. So some of them might be a little bit skewed. But anyways, let's take a look at the West region. Here's a look at the West region. We have Arizona coming in as the number 1 seed, and we'll definitely be interested to see how far they can go. We have Tommy Lloyd. This is his 5th year at Arizona. This is probably the best team that he's had to date. So we'll be interested to see. This is a team that's got Final Four and championship aspirations. But let's take a look at the first matchup. I'm going to try to be a little bit quicker in these 1 versus 16 matchups because I'm not picking a 16 to win, so not really much analysis needed. We have the number 1 seeded Arizona Wildcats playing the number 16 seeded Long Island Sharks. This game is set to tip on Friday at 1:35 in San Diego, California. The Long Island Sharks had a pretty good season. They came in as the number 1 seed in the Northeast Conference, and they were able to win the conference. They did have their first round against Chicago State, and Chicago State, like one of the worst teams in Division I, and they pushed them to the brink. And I was score watching that. I didn't watch the game, but you just had the sense, and it always happens with these 1 seeds that there's so much pressure on them, and you just had the sense like Chicago State was hanging around. They were down 4, they were down 5. You just had the sense that maybe Chicago State was going to hit like a big time shot and beat Long Island. But Long Island able to get through that game and then beat Mercyhurst in the finals. So they get out. They're in the NCAA tournament. They play Arizona. This is probably the best team that they've played all year. And this Arizona team is extremely impressive. Undefeated in the non-conference. They had wins over Florida, Uconn, UCLA, Auburn, Alabama, San Diego State. All good teams, all quad 1 teams, all quad 1 wins for them. So I honestly thought that this Arizona team was going to be the overall number 1 seed. They did have 2 losses in conference. They were back-to-back. One was at Kansas. Obviously, we know it was a Monday night in the fog. Bill Self is, I think it's like 30-0 or something like that in the fog on Monday night. So very, very tough environment. Arizona only loses at 82-78. Not to mention that Kansas didn't have Darian Peterson in that game either. So pretty interesting to see them be able to pull out that win without their best player. Follow that up on the following Saturday. Arizona plays Texas Tech, and Texas Tech is able to beat them 78-75 in pretty impressive fashion there. But those are the 2 losses for Arizona. I don't think they're going to get another one here to the Long Island Sharks. This might be a close, maybe first 15 minutes, maybe a close first half. Long Island did play Georgia very close when they traveled out there at the beginning of the year. I think they were leading. The Long Island was leading at the half against Georgia. Georgia, obviously a tournament team here, but Arizona's a different caliber. They're a much higher step up than Georgia, so we would need a superhuman effort from Long Island to be competitive in this game. So give me Arizona. I'll say they win by 25. Next matchup, we have the number 8 seeded Villanova Wildcats taking on the number 9 seeded Utah State Aggies. This game is set to tip Friday at 4:10 p.m. in San Diego, California. I kind of like that it's on the West Coast for Utah State. I think that might benefit them. This is a little bit of a travel spot for Villanova. They're going to have to travel across the U.S. to get to this San Diego. And Villanova's returning to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2022. They are led by Kevin Willard as their head coach. It's his first year here, so a pretty good turnaround here, finishing 3rd in the Big East. This team likes to play at a slower pace. They don't really match up very well with athletic teams. I think we saw just a little bit outmatched against St. John's and Uconn, but honestly, I think that we'll see them start to close the gap in the next few years with Willard as the head coach. Utah State, on the other hand, finished 28-6, 15-5 in the Mountain West Conference. They're able to win the tournament, beating San Diego State, who was left out of this tournament. I think that matchup, both were playing for their ability to go to the tournament. I don't know if either was going to get an automatic bid. It's a fun thing to note that Utah State does have one of the best home environments in the nation. Obviously, they're not playing at home, but it is fun to note that. And then also, you look at some of these matchups at home that they get, they have some big wins, but that environment is just very tricky to play in. Similar to obviously West Coast, if you're not familiar with it, I would compare it to a Cameron Indoor type stadium. The students, there's not really much to do there, so they're just going out, they're getting out there, they're there about an hour early with all the activities and festivities going on for the game. So a really fun environment to be a part of. In 2025, and this is the one thing that is kind of keeping me off, Utah State, but I think I am eventually going to choose Utah State. In 2025, Utah State lost in the first round to UCLA. In the 10-7 matchup, they lost 72-47, and obviously that matchup, everyone was expecting that game to be a little bit closer, but UCLA just comes out and really just pummels Utah State and really puts them in their place. Obviously you got two West Coast teams there. For me, one of the biggest things for Villanova is the loss of Matt Hodge. He was the forward at Villanova. He tore his ACL in early March, and the thing that they're going to lose there is their size and their ability to rebound, and that's something that Utah State is bringing here, and I think that's going to play a big difference here. Utah State is going to get a lot of second chance points. They're going to be able to rebound the ball if Villanova misses. If they out rebound Villanova, I don't see how Villanova is going to be able to win this game. So looking at that matchup, Utah State's got a ton of size. For me, I'm just still thinking about that matchup last year, because I think I did choose Utah State over UCLA. I think UCLA was very similar to this year's UCLA team, kind of limping into the tournament, but then they're able to get that big win. I'm going to go with Utah State here. I think it's going to be a close game. I'll say Utah State wins by 6. Next game, we have the number 5 seed Wisconsin Badgers playing the number 12 seed High Point Panthers. This game is set for Thursday, 1:50 tip in Portland, Oregon. And I'm hearing some people talk about this High Point team potentially being an upset for Wisconsin, and honestly, I'm just not seeing it. Yes, I understand that this High Point team is 30-4. They're 15-1 in conference. But when you really dig a little bit deeper, I mean, this is the Big South we're talking about, and also they haven't played a Quad 1 team. So that's a little bit concerning, when you're looking at a team to kind of step up. I'm not asking them to be a team like Winthrop or Furman. I'm asking them to beat a team like Wisconsin. So we haven't seen them be able to do that. Now, a couple of positive things for High Point. They do run a fast-paced offense, so they are going to be able to put points on the board. They're going to try and make Wisconsin go up and down the court with them, but I assume that Wisconsin is going to be able to do that just as easily with them. High Point is on I believe it's like a 11-game winning streak here. They were able to beat Winthrop in the finals 91-76. Not really too difficult getting through that tournament to qualify. Now, looking at Wisconsin, on the other hand, they're sitting at 24-10, 14-6 in the Big Ten. Last year in 2025, they did make it out to the second round, and they lost to BYU 91-89 in a really tough matchup. Wisconsin was the number 3 seed there, so maybe they were expected to win. They had a really tough start to the season. They didn't look good, and everyone continued to kind of put them as the favorite in a lot of these games. They played BYU, and everyone was thinking, oh, this is the rematch of last year. Wisconsin's going to get the revenge. And BYU just stomps them 98-70. They lose against TCU by 11. They beat Marquette. I mean, great. That's one of the worst teams in the Big East. They beat Northwestern. Then they start conference play. They play at Nebraska, and they lose by 30. And you think, oh, okay, here we are. We're back to kind of where we were with BYU. They lose to Villanova by 10 in overtime. They lose to Purdue by 16 at home. And this just doesn't, now we're into, this is January 3rd. So it really doesn't look like a great start to Wisconsin. But credit to them, Greg Gard, this is his 11th season with the team as the head coach. Really able to turn it around. I mean, a few games later, on the 10th of January, they go into Michigan and win 91-88. Extremely impressive win, and that kind of jump-started their season for them, being able to get wins over Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue, and Illinois again in the tournament, ending the Big Ten tournament with a loss to Michigan by 3. I just can't see a path for this High Point team for me I need to see that they can prove that they can hang with one of these teams, and they haven't done that this season. So I think it's going to be Wisconsin winning this matchup. I'm going to say Wisconsin wins by 8. I think it's going to be a little bit closer at the beginning. I see Wisconsin kind of pulling away, kind of having that like 6-point, 8-point buffer the whole a lot of the game, a lot of the second half. So give me Wisconsin by 8. Next matchup, we have the number 4 seed Arkansas Razorbacks playing the number 13 seed at Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. This game is set to tip Thursday at 4:25 in Portland, Oregon. And we got to tip our cap to Hawaii to be able to win this conference. I mean, it's never easy, obviously, to travel out to the island and play games. And, that gives them a little bit of a home advantage there. But conversely, they have to travel out here to the West Coast. So that's just as hard, and they have to do it multiple times. And for them to go into this Big West tournament and beat UC Irvine, a UC Irvine team that we know has a pretty strong pedigree from the last few years, that's a pretty impressive win for them. So hats off to them to be able to get this. Now they play Arkansas, and this Arkansas team, obviously very tricky, led by head coach John Calipari. They won the SEC Conference Tournament, and this is Calipari's second year here. He returns the most scoring points than any other team in the SEC, and obviously we saw that pay dividends in the moments that it matters in the SEC tournament. In 2025, they lost as the 10 seed to the number 3 seed Texas Tech 85-83 in overtime in the Sweet 16. The one thing that I really like about this offense is Arkansas really does take care of the ball. Not a lot of turnovers from this offense. They also play a pretty stifling defense as well. One thing to note about Hawaii is they have a lot of size, so they might be able to bother and disrupt maybe like the driving to the hoop game from Arkansas. But also Hawaii has one of the better 3-point defenses, so they're not going to be able to, very similar to like kind of what we talked about with St. John's, like they're not going to be able to get some of these bigger shots to get maybe a bigger lead against Hawaii. So I honestly think that this game is going to be a little bit closer than people think. I see that like it's projected to be around like 15 points, and I honestly myself think that it's going to be around 10. I'm going to say that Arkansas is going to win this. I don't see Hawaii being able to push them enough to where they can get the win, but I think Hawaii is going to be kind of in this, kind of nipping at the feet of Arkansas throughout the whole game. I'm going to say Arkansas wins this one by 10. Next match, we have a play-in game. This game is set to tip off around 9:15 on Tuesday in Dayton, Ohio. We have the number 11 seeded Texas Longhorns playing the number 11 seeded NC State Wolfpack. This is actually a rematch of a game that happened a little bit earlier in a tournament preseason in November, where Texas was able to win 102-97. Now, I don't think there's going to be that many points in this game. I think that was the third game in 3 days, I believe. And obviously, when you're playing that much, there's some tired legs. The defense kind of goes a little bit. Players are able to cut to the net a little bit quicker and everything. So I think we're going to see a little bit more defense, but maybe not that much more. Both these teams are moving in the wrong direction, losing 5 of their last 6 games. And looking at NC State's schedule, they've actually lost 7 of their last 9. So this just isn't a team that you really want to side with right now. They went into the ACC tournament. They were able to get a 10-point win over Pitt, who is one of the worst teams in the ACC. And then they lost by 7 to Virginia. That's a little bit promising, but right now we're asking for them to win against a Texas team that they lost to prior. Non-conference, this NC State team opened up preseason. They were ranked top 25. They come in, they beat VCU, so that seems like a pretty good win at the time. VCU, a solid team, obviously making the field here in the tournament. They lost to Seton Hall in the first round of their preseason tournament, And that was a little bit of a surprise, but we saw Seton Hall is much improved this year. Their defense looks a lot better. They gave NC State a little bit of problem there with the defense as well. 10-point loss to Auburn. Auburn ranked number 20 at the time, but we know this Auburn team ended up kind of regressing a lot back. They were definitely not a top 25 team, and they didn't even make the field. A 1-point loss to Kansas, that was actually a pretty good game. NC State led most of that game, and Kansas was able to come back and win. That was kind of a tricky spot for Kansas at NC State. Very hostile environment, and good win for them to get that in overtime, but tough loss for NC State. And we do kind of see this pattern a little bit. I think it was the Miami game was very similar, where NC State had a lead with like a minute to go, and then they blow it and lose by 1. We've seen that multiple times from this NC State team, so it's really tough to trust them in a one possession game. That's basically what we're looking at here. Like, I think this is going to be one possession one way or another. It's probably going to come down to whoever has the ball last. But I don't know. Do I trust that NC State's going to be able to score? Or do I trust if they're up 5 that they're going to be able to secure the ball? I don't know. Let's take a look at this Texas team schedule. And again, they've lost 5 of their last 6 as well, losing to Ole Miss in the SEC tournament. But we saw that Ole Miss went on this kind of magical run to the semifinals of the SEC tournament, losing to Arkansas in overtime. And Texas hasn't been too bad. 15-point loss to Duke was their first game. 1-point loss to Arizona State. They beat Chaminade and NC State. A 20-point loss to Virginia. We know Virginia's pretty solid in the ACC. Obviously, they just gave Duke a run for their money in the ACC tournament title game. Then a tough 8-point loss at Uconn, which was pretty impressive there. Then they get into ACC play where they go 9-9. So for me, looking at these two, I just can't trust NC State. Texas has already gotten a win over them. Obviously, we're going to want to see, NC State's going to want the revenge, but I don't think that's going to be enough to get them through this game. I'm going to take Texas. I think they're going to win by probably 2. It's probably going to be a last-minute shot. The winner of NC State Texas gets the opportunity to play the number 6 seed BYU. And I'm not going to lie, I was ready to pick against BYU. And I was telling myself, whoever they play, I'm just going to pick against them. Because BYU's another team that's kind of headed in the wrong direction. They had an injury to one of their guards, Saunders. And he was kind of the glue that held everything together. Now, obviously, BYU does have their freshman, AJ Debinsa. And Debinsa is the highest scoring player in the nation. So, yes, they have that. But for some reason, it just seems like nothing is really gelling since Saunders' injury. So I'm really interested to see how far they can go. Obviously, would love to see Debinsa have a big tournament, make a big name for himself here. But I would probably pick whoever wins that game, that Texas or NC State. I'd probably pick BYU to beat them. Our next matchup is between the number 3 seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs taking on the number 14 seeded Kennesaw State Owls. This game is set to tip Thursday at 10 p.m. in Portland, Oregon. Gonzaga coming in, they're 30-3, 16-2. Mark Few, obviously, lots of tournament experience as their head coach. Gonzaga able to win the West Coast Conference over Santa Clara. But I always do feel like their numbers, their offensive numbers, their defensive numbers are a little bit inflated because of the teams that they play in their conference. I think they are a little bit weaker, so it's always tough to see. Plus, I think it's good for them to play a team like Kennesaw to kind of get comfortable with the tournament. The last thing you want to see if you're Gonzaga is getting stuck in a 7-10 matchup and playing an Arkansas or someone like that. So this will be a good game for them to kind of get going here in the tournament. Now, one thing we got to note here with Gonzaga is they have a couple of injuries. Braden Huff has a left knee injury. He suffered that back in January, and Mark Few did say He's coming back to practice with like limited practice, so we got to keep an eye on that. I have a weird feeling that he's not going to play this weekend, but hopefully if they make the next weekend, he'll be able to play there. Jalen Worley also had a quad contusion, but he was able to return March 9th. Not as important. Huff averages about 17 to 18 points a game, so that's extremely important for them to have someone like that. And if you notice, like with Huff out, the scoring has just been very deficient for Gonzaga. So we got to keep an eye out on that. Now, Kennesaw State, on the other hand, pretty nice win to win the Conference USA title. They faced a lot of adversity. So Kennesaw State was kind of like middle of the pack in Conference USA, and they were able to come out and win this. And it's a pretty nice story to hear. They had a couple players. One guy who was their best player, Cottle, he got caught in a gambling probe and was not allowed to play for the entire year. So kind of sucks, like going into the season, you lose your best player. Then they got a transfer from Wake Forest, and he unfortunately got in an accident and wasn't able to play for the season either. So this is a team that's pretty deficient on with their players as well, but they were able to come together and win the tournament to get into the NCAA. They do play a very fast pace. They're top 14 pace in the nation, so we got to keep an eye out for that. But honestly, I think that's going to really benefit Gonzaga. I think they're going to like to run and gun with a team like Kennesaw because they're not going to feel as threatened with them. It's not going to be like running and gunning with like a team like Alabama, although Gonzaga has beaten them. But running and gunning with a team like Kennesaw is not going to be too challenging here. For me, I think this is a pretty quick one. I got to go with Gonzaga. I think they're going to win probably by like 15 to 20. I think it's going to be a fast-paced game. There's going to be a lot of points scored. This will be a fun game to watch. So let's say Gonzaga wins by 15. I feel like we're starting to go through these matchups a little bit faster, so that's good. Next matchup, we have the number 7 seeded Miami Hurricanes playing the number 10 seeded Missouri Tigers. This game is set to tip on Friday night at 10:10 p.m. in St. Louis, Missouri. And this is the last game up. So all eyes will be on this game at one point. And, hats off to Jai Lucas here, the Miami head coach. It's his first year, and he's able to turn this team around from being the worst team in the ACC last year to now a 25-8, 13-5 ACC conference record team. And extremely impressive. I really like the way this Miami team has been playing. They are 34 in offensive efficiency, 45 in defensive efficiency, 6-6 with their quad 1 wins. They shoot around 34% from 3, about 58% from 2-point. That's really solid. The one cause for concern is the free throw shooting, which is about 68%. So if it is a close game, Miami has a lead, and you got Missouri fouling, we got to have a heads up for that. That might be a little bit sticky. Now, this Missouri team, on the other hand, they're coming off a 3-game losing streak, and that always is cause for concern for me. I don't like picking teams that have been losing because it's tough for them to turn around, and you're not turning it around, and you're not playing like a Kennesaw State. You're turning it around. You got to play one of the top 4 teams in the ACC. So this is kind of a big ask for them. Looking at Missouri, we have they are 40 in offensive efficiency, 68 in defensive efficiency, 5-7 in their quad 1 matchups. 35% from 3, 57% from 2. And again, very similar to Miami, they're 68% from the free throws. So this is going to go either way. This is probably going to be both teams just like giving it back and forth to each other here, having the opportunity. I mean, this is a toss-up for me, but I got to go with the team that isn't on this losing streak. Missouri's losses, they lost to Kentucky in the SEC tournament, fine. That's an okay loss. But then you have a loss to Oklahoma. That just like an 80-64 loss to Oklahoma. That's just not gonna. That just doesn't sit very well with me. I like the way this Miami team is playing. I like the way Jai Lucas has his team playing. So give me Miami. I bet they win by a possession. Next match we have the number 2 Purdue Boilermakers taking on the number 15 seeded Queens Royals. And this game is set to tip on Friday at 7:35 in St. Louis, Missouri. Purdue, we know, just won the Big Ten tournament, and they're clicking at the exact right time. This team was built to win the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament. So they have some veteran leadership in Braden Smith and Kaufman Wren at guard. Obviously, I feel like the whole regular season, they were a little bit under expectations. They came in, everyone's saying this is the best team in the nation. They were preseason number 1. Then they have this weird loss to Iowa State. And everything kind of starts to kind of come undone a little bit. A few more kind of questionable losses for them, but able to bring it back together. And this was the best we've seen Braden Smith this year, was in this Michigan game. Just impressive stuff from him, and that's exciting for Purdue fans to see. Now, I'm hearing a lot of people say that this is going to be Purdue by like 1,000,000 points. I don't know if I would really buy into that just yet. I'm not saying this Queens team is great, but I don't know if Purdue is really going to slam the door on a team like this. Queens able to get through the Atlantic Sun, and they just showed that they can really just fight through anything. They had to beat the number 1 and number 2 seeds to win the conference tournament. They beat Austin Peay in the semifinals and then Central Arkansas in overtime in the finals to get to the NCAA tournament. Pretty impressive from them. Not going to waste too much time here. I think Purdue gets through. I think I'm going to pick them to get through. I don't really see Queens having a path to win this, but give me Purdue. They're probably going to win by, I'll say, 18 to 20 points, but don't think that they're going to win by like 30. Here's a look at the West Region bracket with my picks for the round of 32. Pretty chalky picks, I'll admit, but I honestly don't see any upsets given the teams that are playing here, given the lower seeds that are playing here. I just don't see many upsets coming from this bracket. So let's move on to the next region. And we're about to hit the hour mark, and we're halfway there. Next region is the South region. Let's take a look at the bracket. Here's a look at the bracket. We got Florida coming in as the number 1 seed, despite losing to Vanderbilt in embarrassing fashion almost in the SEC tournament. They still are able to retain a number 1 seed here. Let's take a look at the matchups. Here's a matchup that I'm sure everyone's been clamoring about. We got the number 16 Prairie View A&M Panthers playing the number 16 Lehigh Mountain Hawks. This game is set to tip on Wednesday at 6:40 p.m. in Dayton, Ohio. I don't really have much to offer for either of these. I can say that I am a little bit disappointed that Navy wasn't able to make it through the Patriot League. I thought they were playing really good basketball. They were 17-1 in conference, I believe. So they slipped up a little bit in the semifinals, and we could kind of sense it. I think it was their quarterfinal game was really close as well. So it just felt like it was never gonna happen. It's really unfortunate because I feel like they could have come in and maybe been one of those like 15 or 14 seeds to get a big upset, but Lehigh able to get that win over BU in the finals to get through. They are 11-7 in conference, 18-16 overall. And Lehigh did play a pretty challenging schedule. I think they played Houston. Yes, they played Houston, lost 75-57. They played West Virginia at West Virginia, always a hostile environment. Played at Rutgers, also a hostile environment. So I kind of like Lehigh in this situation here. Prairie View also 9-9. They were middle of the pack here towards the bottom and able to come out and win, beating Southern in the finals. Southern was the number 2 here, and Prairie View able to beat them 72-66. So much pressure on these teams, even when they get the higher seed, to win that one and done game. I'm gonna pick Lehigh here. I think it's gonna be a pretty close game, but I'll pick Lehigh to win by 4, and we'll take a look at the next matchup. And obviously, that 16 matchup is gonna come out and play Florida, so it would be Lehigh or Prairie View. It doesn't matter. Florida's gonna win that game. They'll win by like 25 points. But at least one of those teams will be able to get a win in the tournament. Our next matchup is the number 8 seeded Clemson Tigers playing the number 9 seeded Iowa Hawkeyes. This game is set to tip on Friday at 6:50 in Tampa, Florida. And doesn't that Clemson Tiger look like the Calvin and Hobbes drawing? I don't know. I keep looking at it. Anyways, looking at this Iowa Hawkeyes, both these teams have kind of like clung on for dear life to make this tournament. We have Iowa, who's lost 7 of their last 10 games, and Clemson, who's lost 6 of their last 10 games. So not two teams that we really want to be picking against, but now we have to somehow find a way to pick one. The one thing that stands out to me is Iowa has a very slow, deliberate pace. They're going to keep your possessions low. They're going to make you kind of like lull you to sleep a little bit with how slow of a pace that they play. Now, this is really good if Iowa is able to control the pace. But if they can't, they're going to have a lot of issues. So I'm going to be curious to see if Clemson can kind of up this pace a little bit. We saw in the I think it was Iowa State's first conference game, and it was against Michigan State, and everyone was kind of wondering, this Iowa team looks pretty chippy. They look like they can kind of like maybe hang with some of these teams, and Michigan State came out and just sucker punched them. And I think they won by about 20, but Iowa was trying to play from behind the entire game, and that's something they can't do. And obviously, in this tournament, in the NCAA tournament, I don't know if it's going to be this game. It's probably going to be the next game if they win. They're going to have to figure out how to play a little bit of a faster tempo to win, to come from behind. I would be wary, though, if Clemson does get out to like a 10 or 15-point lead, how Iowa's going to be able to come back and win this game with the tempo that they play. For me here, there's not really much separating these guys. Obviously, we have Iowa, adjusted offense 30th in the nation, adjusted defense 35th in the nation. That's pretty solid. They're 4-9 in their quad 1 wins, but you look at these quad 1s and it's just not very impressive, from Iowa. They have a win against Nebraska, who kind of cooled off after having that long winning streak. But then Iowa turns around and loses at Nebraska. So I know the ACC is down a little bit, and I really want to pick Clemson. The one thing that's keeping me from picking Clemson is Ben McCollum, the Iowa head coach. And this is his first year here. 10-10. He's able to turn this team around, right? They fired Fran McCaffrey from last year. He's over at Penn. We'll talk about them in a second. But he's able to kind of like implement this defensive mindset and this slow-paced offense that just frustrates a lot of teams. It kind of has them like, especially if you can kind of muck it up a little bit. We talked about that with Northern Iowa. That frustrates some of these athletes and these fast-paced teams. So give me Iowa. I feel like Iowa's going to win this by 6 over Clemson. It's going to be a quick one for me. We got the number 5 seeded Vanderbilt Commodores playing the number 12 seeded Mcneese State Cowboys. This game is going off Thursday at 3:15 p.m. in Oklahoma City. This is not, and I feel like a lot of people are going to be picking McNeese because we know Vanderbilt's typically a vulnerable team in the NCAA tournament, and McNeese is kind of like that household name people remember. But this is not the same McNeese team. They are playing good basketball, but this is not the same like defensive-driven Mcneese team that we remember. They have a new coach. They play a little bit more offense, a little bit more tempo, and guess what? That's going to play right into Vanderbilt. One thing to note about Mcneese, they were able to win the Southland Conference over Stephen F. Austin, who was the 1 seed. But the Southland Conference was at Mcneese. So Mcneese kind of had that home advantage, and the reason they got that, I think I read somewhere that Mcneese was threatening to leave the conference, and Southland kind of came in with some bargaining chips, and one of them was for them to host the conference for, I don't know, X amount of years. So pretty nice. I mean, this definitely paid off for them. They're able to beat the number 1 seed, the number 1 team in the conference, and get to the tournament. I mean, that's huge for them, for their program. Now they play Vanderbilt, and this Vanderbilt team is no joke. They just lost in the finals of the SEC tournament to Arkansas, 86-75. Not too shabby, but they did beat Florida in the semis. This is the number 1 seeded Florida team, 91-74. Obviously, we can argue maybe that Florida team wasn't as focused. They're just looking forward to the NCAA tournament. But Vanderbilt's got some really, really talented offense. They are number 7 nationally in offensive efficiency and number 29 in defensive efficiency, 10-7 in quad 1, 7-1 in quad 2. That's just extremely impressive. And I feel like this Vanderbilt team's kind of been flying under the radar a little bit. Not a lot of people have been talking about them. They did hit SEC play, and at one point they were 8-6, so not too impressive. Obviously you have some of the bigger names like your Alabamas and your Arkansas and your Tennessees and your Floridas. So Vanderbilt kind of flying under the radar. I think they win this game by, I'm going to say 15 points. I think they win big here. I think they really run Mcneese out of the gym. So give me Vanderbilt by 15. Next game, we have the number 4 seeded Nebraska Cornhuskers playing the number 13 seeded Troy Trojans. This game is set to tip at 12:50 on Thursday in Oklahoma City. One of the first games out, and one of the things you're going to hear all week is Nebraska has never won a NCAA tournament game. And obviously, that's something that this team has heard, and I kind of like the idea of this Nebraska team having to prove something, because I felt like when they were on that they were 20-0 to start the season. When they were on that winning streak, I felt like every single week they felt like they came in and had to prove themselves, and they did. Like notching some huge wins over Wisconsin. They beat by 30. They beat Michigan State. They beat Ohio State. Their first loss comes to Michigan. It's only by a single possession. So extremely close competitive game. But this team has kind of trailed off a little bit. After going 20-0, they're 6-6 now. And the cause for concern for me is the last 2 games. We have a 20-point loss to UCLA and a 16-point loss to Purdue in the Big Ten tournament. And the reason I say that is because I wonder if maybe they're losing their luster a little bit. Maybe they're losing that belief a little bit. But I do like kind of that narrative of like pushing back, this team's never won an NCAA tournament. So they're going to be very motivated coming out here to play this Troy team. And looking at this Troy team, they win the Sun Belt Conference. They're 22-11 overall, 12-6 in the Sun Belt. They're able to get through and beat Georgia Southern in the finals, 77-61. And this Troy team actually stood out to me a little bit earlier on in the season when they had their double overtime win over San Diego State. And that was at San Diego State. And that's not an easy place to play. At that time, San Diego State was projected to be one of the better teams. They were one of the better teams in the Mountain West Conference. And you think, okay, they're going to go play in less than 48 hours. They're going to go play USC, and they're going to be exhausted. But they take USC down to the wire in a triple overtime game, losing 107-106 at USC, another hostile environment. So this is a team that they like to play up to their competition, and I have a weird feeling about this game. I don't know if I'm going to pick Troy, but I have such a weird feeling about this game that maybe Nebraska isn't meant to get that win this year. We have Nebraska is led by Fred Hoiberg, who is in his 7th season now, and obviously, as we noted, he hasn't won a game here either, and he was able to win. He coached over at Iowa State and was able to get 4 NCAA wins over there. So it would be nice for him to get his first win here. This Nebraska team is extremely lethal from 3-point range, and that's something that when they played Michigan, they shot extremely well. And I think that's something, if a team is going to beat Michigan during the in this tournament, they're going to have to shoot really well from the 3. Now, one thing to know is this Troy team is 42nd in 3-point defense. So maybe Nebraska's not going to get as many wide open shots as we think. I think people kind of already writing Nebraska through. I would say not so fast. I think this is going to be a really tough back and forth game, but I'm going to go with Nebraska to get their first NCAA tournament win. I'm going to say Nebraska wins by 5. Next game, we have the number 6 North Carolina Tar Heels taking on the number 11 VCU Rams. This game is set to tip at 6:50 on Thursday in Greenville, South Carolina. I think that's going to be huge. I think there's going to be a lot of North Carolina fans. I'm kind of surprised that people are kind of leaning towards VCU. I get it. UNC doesn't have Caleb Wilson. He's been their best player all year. He's one of the top 5 freshmen. Probably going to be a top 10 pick for the NBA draft. So not having him is a big gap, but this North Carolina team does still have talent. I mean, Trimble's a very, very solid player as well. So I wouldn't count them out just yet. I really think that we can't be counting this. Plus, I haven't seen, let's take a look at this VCU schedule. They have had chances to step up, but they just haven't been able to win. Utah State, a 3-point loss. NC State, a 6-point loss. Vanderbilt, a 15-point loss. Okay, so they got a win over USF. They got a win over Virginia Tech. New Mexico, a 3-point loss. So, I feel like we have a little bit of this recency bias, seeing VCU beating Dayton by 8. Kind of a nervy game, too. I think they should have won that by maybe a little bit more, but able to win the A-10 here. Maybe people are seeing that VCU name as well. It's common to see that and think about that Final Four run that they made a while back. I'm telling you, this North Carolina team is on a different level. They're going to beat this VCU team. I cannot believe that people are thinking it's going to be close. I'm going to take North Carolina. I say North Carolina wins by 8. This one's going to be pretty quick. We got the number 3 seeded Illinois Fighting Illini playing the number 14 seeded Penn Quakers. And the Penn Quakers, great win coming in and taking out the best team in the Ivy League, Yale. And that's huge for Fran McCaffrey in his first year. Obviously, we talked about Fran McCaffrey, former Iowa coach. Not much defense coached here for Penn. They play a very fast pace. They like to go up and down. They had a couple of injuries here, but they had a few players step up, including TJ Power on their team, who was able to have 44 points in the final against Yale. And that's just like a superhuman effort for them to get to the tournament. I don't see something like that happening again. I really think Illinois is going to be able to name their number. I think this is a very tough matchup for Penn. They're going up against the number 2 offense in the nation. Just extremely difficult, especially when you don't play defense. Illinois is going to be able to name their number here. I'm going to say Illinois by 20 plus over Penn. It's not even going to be close. Next game, we have the number 7 seeded St. Mary's Gales taking on the number 10 seeded Texas A&M Aggies. This game is tipping off Thursday at 7:35 in Oklahoma City. And when they first announced this game, I was extremely excited because it is just two contrasting styles. We have Texas A&M, who wants to run up and down, can score up to 100 points, and then we have St. Mary's, who wants to just take the air out of the ball and hold the ball as long as they possibly can, long possessions, limiting the possessions, and playing a slower pace. So it's going to be really interesting to see who's going to win out here. Obviously, we have Texas A&M. The big question here was Bucky McMillan. He came from Samford, and people were wondering if this Bucky ball is what they call it, if this was going to work in the higher levels of the conference of Power 5, Power 4 conferences. And the first half of the season, he looked like a genius. They start out, they're 17-4, 7-1. They're winning the SEC conference. Obviously, the SEC might be down a little bit, but still 7-1 in that conference. It looks like, oh wow, this is something that maybe other teams have to play. Then they lose this 100-97 thrilling game against Alabama. Then Florida just shuts them down with defense, and they lose 86-67. Missouri, they lose by 1, and Vanderbilt is able to shut them down 82-69. So when they started to play up against some of the higher level teams, this fast-paced style of play was not able to work. So the concern that I have too is Texas A&M played Oklahoma in the SEC tournament, and they lost 83-63. They lost by 20 to an Oklahoma team that is right outside in the bubble. But honestly, this is not a good Oklahoma team. This St. Mary's team is really gritty. I like what I see from them. Obviously, not the result that they wanted. They lost to Santa Clara in the semifinals, 76-71. But they have notched a few solid wins, including the one win over Gonzaga to wrap up their regular season. They haven't really had a chance. They did play Vanderbilt. They lost 96-71. But we did just talk about Vanderbilt. That's a top 10 offense in the nation. So nothing to really be too sad about in that matchup. Looking at these teams, I really think St. Mary's is going to frustrate A&M, and A&M's defense isn't great. They're just going to try to up that pace, and I think St. Mary's is just going to be so deliberate with their offense that Texas A&M isn't going to be able to get into that rhythm. I really hate picking teams that are non-Power 4 against, because St. Mary's, of course, has been in this situation many times, and we don't often see them winning in the 7-10 matchup. But I feel like this is a different type of St. Mary's team. I think they have a lot of maturity. I think they're going to be able to outplay Texas A&M here. So I'm going to take St. Mary's. I think St. Mary's is probably going to win by 5. This next one will be quick as well. We have the Houston Cougars, number 2 seed, taking on the number 15 seeded Idaho Vandals. This game is set to tip on Thursday at 10:10 in Oklahoma City. This is the last game on Thursday night, so all eyes will be on this game. And honestly, I wish it was a little bit more of a more entertaining game. I think this is going to be an early night for everyone. Hey, maybe, you got to go to work, so I guess it'll be good. Houston's going to be up by 20 at the half, so you'll be able to go to sleep. This Houston team has been very impressive in the Big 12. Obviously, the Big 12, one of the best conferences in the nation. Houston coming out, losing to Arizona in the finals. Very tough match, or tough game played here. Losing 79-74, but to get to the finals, they were able to beat BYU 73-66, and then just wallop Kansas 69-47. So Houston is looking strong. I love their defense. I think they've always been very strong defensively, but they've also stepped it up a little bit offensively. They are the number 12 offensive efficient team, and then number 5 in defensive efficiency. So this is a recipe for success in the tournament. Plus, they bring back some veteran players like Uzan to be a part of this team, and that's definitely going to help contribute as they move later on in here. But this isn't going to be that big of a question here. I think Houston's going to win this game by probably 20 plus again. So give me Houston by 20. And here's a look at the South region with my round of 32 picks. Again, a pretty chalky draw, but remember last year was also a pretty chalky first round. I think it's going to get really interesting as we start to kind of move through some of these matchups. I think once we get out to the Sweet 16, I think these are going to be much harder to pick. But let's move on to the next region. And we're on to our final region, the Midwest region. And I feel like I've been riffing a little bit more with you guys. You'll have to let me know if that's good or bad. I feel like the last two regions I've been a little bit kind of like just going off on what I think these matchups are going to look like rather than going through the numbers. I thought the East region we went a lot in depth with the numbers, but I kind of want to keep these videos a little bit quicker. I think once we get into the second round, it'll be a little bit easier to kind of analyze what we've seen already. But let me know what you guys think. Maybe I should be a little bit more structured. But I did find like the East region was getting a little boring for me, so I wanted to kind of change it up a little bit, make it a little bit quicker there. Let's take a look at the bracket. And I saved this one for last because this to me is the trickiest one. I feel like there's a lot of tricky matchups here that I've just been kind of putting off because I don't want to address them, but now we have to go through them. Let's take a look at the first matchup. We'll start with the play-in game. We have the number 16 seeded UMBC Retrievers taking on the number 16 seeded Howard Bison. And, kind of unfortunate. So Howard played a game in the middle of their conference season against Yale, and they had the lead in that game. They ended up losing, and honestly, if they had won that, they probably wouldn't be sitting in a play-in. They probably would be looking at either a solid 16 or maybe even a 15. Yale's a solid team, and Howard played them to overtime. Just a really good look there. UMBC, on the other hand, they haven't lost since January. They had a 10-point loss to Vermont, and ever since then, they've just been pummeling teams. And then they get to the finals against Vermont in the America East Championship, and they do the same exact thing. That game was close for a little bit, but UMBC able to hit a couple of threes to pull away. I think this is a pretty evenly matched game. I can see it going either way. I really like. I'm gonna take the hot hand in UMBC. I think that I like the way that they shot against Vermont. I think they can keep themselves in with a lot of those plays. So give me UMBC. Probably gonna be last possession. So give me UMBC to win by 2. And one of those teams will have the opportunity to play Michigan, the number 1 seed in this region. I just nothing else to say there. I really like this Michigan team. I think they're going to advance probably out to at least the Elite 8, but Michigan's going to beat whoever comes through there in the 16. And we have the number 8 seeded Georgia Bulldogs taking on the number 9 seeded St. Louis Billikens. This game is set to tip off on Thursday at 9:45 p.m. in Buffalo, New York. I feel like this St. Louis team is a little bit of a paper tiger. I don't see any like quality wins. Okay, they beat Santa Clara by 1. They lost to Stanford by 1. They beat Grand Canyon. Back then that seemed like a good win, but now it really isn't. They played Chicago State. We talked about them, one of the worst teams in the nation. They beat San Francisco by 10. Just not really a strong non-conference. I'm surprised this team made it in. I get it. They're 28-5. They were 24-1. I just think Georgia's really gonna flex their athleticism against this team. St. Louis is 46 offensive efficiency, 61 defensive efficiency, 2-1 in quad 1, 6-3 in quad 2. And this Georgia team, they like to play fast pace. And I think that's what's going to give St. Louis a lot of problems. Like, are they going to be able to keep up scoring with this Georgia team? Georgia is 18th offensive efficiency, 92nd defensive efficiency, 6-7 quad 1, 6-2 quad 2. They have non-conference wins over Cincinnati, a tough 3-point loss to Clemson. They beat LIU, who made it into the tournament. Good win over Auburn. Good win over Alabama. Good win over Kentucky. Tough 4-point loss to a red-hot Ole Miss team. I think this Georgia team's hungry. I think they're going to win this game. I'm going to say Georgia wins this by 5. Next game, we have the number 5 seeded Texas Tech Red Raiders playing the number 12 seeded Akron Zips. This game is set to tip Friday at 12:40 in Tampa, Florida. And this is going to be a really tricky game for Texas Tech. I think people are kind of seeing Akron, the name, and thinking the MAC conference. Maybe they're not going to challenge them, but this Akron team has been extremely solid. 29-5, 17-1 in the MAC. Their one loss coming to the 31-0 Miami of Ohio. And honestly, guys, really happy that both Miami of Ohio and Akron were able to make it into the field. Obviously, if Miami of Ohio won the conference tournament, beating Akron, Akron probably wouldn't have been able to make it in. But now we have 2 MAC teams in this tournament, and we're going to see how good this conference is. I think it's pretty strong. One thing that we always look for when we're looking for a potential upset team is how well do they shoot the 3-point shot, because a team like that, it's going to allow you to take bigger leads, but it's also going to allow you to get back into a game if maybe that Texas Tech type team gets on a run. So looking at their 3-point percentage, Akron is 14th in the nation, shooting at 38.5%, 12th in the nation in 2-point percentage at almost 60% there. So extremely impressive offensive numbers from Akron. Looking at this Texas Tech team, they are 22-10 overall, 12-16 in the Big 12. They have a couple of significant injuries. Number 1, JT Toppin, he was their best player. He's been out since the Arizona State game. And Texas Tech, to their credit, they've actually looked pretty good without him. But now they've also suffered an injury to Christian Anderson, who strained his muscle. I don't know if you guys watched any of the Big 12 tournament, but they had this glass LED court, and a lot of the players were having trouble kind of keeping their balance and everything, and Anderson just kind of slipped a little bit. It looks like he strained one of his muscles, so he's still questionable to be in or out. And it's really tough with these reports because the teams feel a lot of pressure. Last year we got something from the committee basically saying that if you have an injured player, I think it was West Virginia, their star player was injured, and the committee used that as a reason to exclude them from the field. So a lot of these teams are kind of looking at that saying well, let's just say he's probable to get that, to maintain the seed, to maintain getting in. But you see something like a team like Gonzaga, I don't think their top guy is going to play this weekend. And then Texas Tech, I don't know if Anderson's going to be at 100% this weekend either, but they do have him listed as being able to potentially play at least a few minutes here. Texas Tech last year made it to the Elite Eight. They lost as the number 3 seed to the number 1 seed Florida, 84-79. Extremely competitive game. But a little bit of cause for concern, this Texas Tech team, after that injury to Anderson, they lose 75-53 to Iowa State, and that game probably wasn't going to go their way. We talked a little bit about the revenge factor there with Iowa State. Texas Tech able to beat Iowa State at Iowa State 82-73, and obviously the Cyclones looking for a little bit of revenge. So I think they were going to win that game no matter what, but to lose it by 20 is definitely concerning. I really think this Akron team is going to be able to stay in this matchup. They are 0-2 in their quad 1 matchups, losing to Purdue 97-79, and then also losing to Miami of Ohio 76-73 in a very close game. I got to wait and see and kind of see about this Anderson news. I do think even if he plays, I don't think he's going to be 100%. This is a quick turnaround from the conference tournament. I think Akron's going to come out here with something to prove. They looked pretty good against Toledo in the MAC tournament. I think they were really itching to play Miami of Ohio to kind of turn that one back and prove themselves to be the top team in the conference. And in my opinion, this Akron team, even though Miami of Ohio with the undefeated conference record, I felt like Akron is still the best team. I just have so much trouble picking a team like picking a team like Akron over Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech's going to hang on. They're probably going to win this by 2. This matchup's going to be quick, and honestly, I wish Hofstra drew someone other than Alabama because I could see them potentially upsetting a team, but Alabama's just a little bit too athletic with Philon and Holloway at the guards positions. We have number 4 Alabama Crimson Tide taking on the number 13 Hofstra Pride. This game is set to tip on Friday at 3:15 in Tampa, Florida. Again, this is an Alabama team that likes to play a lot of fast pace, one of the fastest in the nation. They don't play a lot of defense. This is a Hofstra team that is a little bit gritty. You know, they got through a pretty tough conference. They were the number 3 seed in the CAA, and they were able to win the conference, beating Monmouth in the finals by 6. But looking at their record, so they did travel to UCF, who we know is now in the tournament. They lost by 4. That's pretty respectable. They did travel to Pittsburgh. They won there. Pitt, obviously the worst team in the ACC, so not really much credit we can give them there. They did travel to Syracuse, and they won by 1. So this is just a very gritty Hofstra team. The problem is I don't think so if this Hofstra team came up against a team like maybe Iowa, I would say, I could see that being a close game because Iowa doesn't like to blow teams out, and Hofstra can kind of hang around, which is what they did in that Syracuse game. But here, Alabama's just going to run out. They're going to run out to a 15-point lead, and they're just going to hold that 10-point stiff arm and keep pushing Hofstra back. And I just can't see this game being close. I really think Alabama's going to win this game by double digits for sure. I'm going to say Alabama wins by 12. I can't really say I'm happy that they're in the play-in game, but I'm happy to see Miami of Ohio made it in. And they were the last team in. The tournament committee talked about scrubbing. They originally said that Miami of Ohio was kind of secured in, but then they did the scrubbing. And I assume that's looking at metrics and everything, and it pushed Miami of Ohio to where they were the last team to get into this field. They take on SMU, who seems to be struggling a little bit themselves. But before we talk about SMU, the one thing that I want to say with Miami of Ohio, just an unbelievable year, 31-0, able to get that final win against Ohio in overtime. I mean, what a dramatic way to cap that 31-win season. And, obviously, we didn't talk about this, but no team has ever been 30-plus wins and not made the tournament. So that would be very unprecedented in the regular season to have a team like that. And I did really like how when Miami of Ohio lost in the MAC tournament, all the other coaches banded together and started to talk about how crazy it would be to leave them out of the NCAA tournament. And that's something that you love to see. Obviously, they're supporting their conference, but it's really good to see the camaraderie of them and being able to get this team kind of over the finish line, over the hump here, and not to see another controversial committee putting in a potential Power 4 conference over a Miami of Ohio, who is a much deserving team. Now, they have to prove it here. Like, this, to me, this is a must win. They have to win this game to prove to everyone that they deserve to be in this field. If they lose this game by like 10 or 15 points, it just sets mid-majors back leaps and bounds. But if they can win this game, now that the committee has paused to think again, if it happens next year, well, we got to let them in, because look at what Miami of Ohio did. The one thing that I love is this game is tipping off on Wednesday at 9:15 in Dayton, Ohio. Dayton, Ohio is 35 minutes, 45 minutes maybe, away from Miami of Ohio. So this is going to be a chaotic crowd for Miami of Ohio, and I can't wait to see it. This is going to be one of the most exciting games of the year. Finally, a team that hasn't played a quad one game is getting their first quad one game, and everyone has been saying this team would never win a quad one matchup. Well, now they have a chance to do it against SMU. And let's take a look at SMU quickly, because I think this team's kind of moving a little bit in the wrong direction. They've lost 5 of their last 6 games, losing to Cal, losing to Stanford, losing to Miami, losing to FSU, beating Syracuse in the first round of the tournament, and then losing to Louisville by 4. For me, this is Miami of Ohio all the way. I think they're gonna win this. I think they're gonna come out. I think they're gonna play Tennessee really tough. I would love to see nothing more than to see Miami of Ohio beat Tennessee. I think that's gonna be a tall task. I just want to see what they look like here against SMU first before I pick them against Tennessee. But I'll put that in the bottom of the draw. I'll put in Miami of Ohio to beat Tennessee, because I really think that's going to happen. But I'm going with Miami of Ohio here. They're going to win by, I'm going to say they're going to win by 8. And here's the Tennessee matchup that we just talked about, the number 6 seed playing potentially either Miami of Ohio or SMU. I think if Miami of Ohio gets through, I really think that they can maybe get a little bit hot. They shoot the ball really well. They defend okay. They're not the best defensively. They just like to run and gun. They like to go high scoring, and I think that would be really fun to watch them do that against Tennessee. If they can kind of build a lead or just go back and forth with them shot for shot, I'll be really interested to see. But for now, let's move to the next slide. This one will be pretty quick too. We got the number 3 seeded Virginia Cavaliers taking on the number 14 seeded Wright State Raiders, and this game is set to tip on Friday the 20th at 1:50 in Philadelphia. Virginia coming off that epic matchup against Duke, and definitely a little bit of revenge for them. They got blown out at Duke, and they just didn't shoot well. They didn't shoot well from the 3. I think Shire came up with a pretty good game plan, recognized that, one of the weaker strengths of the Virginia offense was shooting the 3, so they gave them pretty wide open 3s and were just daring them to shoot it, and Virginia just missed a lot. Duke shot about like 50% from 3 that day, and then it kind of flipped around a little bit here. The Duke's numbers went down a little bit, so the game got a lot closer in the championship game. But would be really curious, if somehow they're able to make it out and maybe play again. Would be curious to see what that looks like. But great win for Duke in that, but great tournament for Virginia. Wright State able to win the Horizon League regular season and then go in and win the conference tournament. Not really much more to say about them. Virginia being led by Ryan Odom. It's his first year coaching, and we remember Ryan Odom from UMBC when he beat Virginia as a number 16 seed. So there's that familiarity. But obviously this guy's kind of like on high alert, of course, for any potential upset. here. I just don't think we're going to see it. I think Virginia's going to win probably by like double digits. I'll say Virginia by 10 points here. Next game, we have the number 7 seeded Kentucky Wildcats taking on the number 10 seeded Santa Clara Broncos. And this game is set to take place on Friday at 12:15 in St. Louis. This is a big opportunity for Santa Clara. I mean, I don't know if you watched the selection show. Like, they were very excited to play this game, to get out here and get a bid to the tournament. They weren't sure if they were able to do it, but that second win that they got against St. Mary's kind of solidified them into the tournament draw. The one problem that I have with Santa Clara is how they're going to handle the athleticism of Kentucky. I don't know if I would say Kentucky's offense is. I feel like I would rate Gonzaga's offense better than Kentucky's offense. So against Gonzaga, Santa Clara was able to hang. They were leading in all 3 of those games. They had leads in the second half. So like they're playing these games very close with a quality team like Gonzaga. Kentucky's another quality team. I mean, in my opinion, I just think that they're kind of moving in the wrong direction. Losing 3 of the last 5 games. Lost to Texas A&M, not too bad. That's a tournament team. Lost to Florida. Okay, that's the number 1 seed, and then another loss to Florida. This Kentucky team, I think, is going to have to get out to an early lead. I don't think you want to mess around with Santa Clara too much here. I think this is a coin flip game, but I can see Santa Clara winning it. I don't know if the pedigree is there to kind of get through a team like Kentucky. We haven't seen them play a team like this all year, and now we're expecting them to kind of step up and take this team out. But I'm going to go with Kentucky to get through here. I'm a little less confident than most of my 7-10 picks, but give me Kentucky to get through. We'll say they win by 5 points. Our final matchup will be a pretty quick one. We have the number 2 Iowa State Cyclones taking on the number 15 seeded Tennessee State Tigers. This game is set to go off on Friday at 2:50 p.m. in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, the Iowa State Cyclones, we got to keep an eye on this team. One thing that I noted throughout the year was they kind of go with the way that Lipsey is playing. If Lipsey is on and he's playing really well, he's their guard, then they play really, really good basketball. But if Lipsey is out in foul trouble, then the offense kind of seems to become a little bit more stagnant. We noticed that he got injured in this St. John's game, I believe, and they ended up I think they ended up just getting by, but the game got really close when Lipsey went out. So definitely want to keep an eye on that. In 2025, Iowa State lost to number 6 Ole Miss in the second round, 91-78. So we know that this Iowa State team is very prone to upsets. I don't think Tennessee State's going to beat them, but we got to look at potentially that 7-10 matchup playing them next round. I think that we might call for an upset there. Now, this Tennessee State team, credit to them, they were able to win the Ohio Valley Conference and then win the conference tournament. They're 23-9 coming in. Not much more to say about this team. I think Iowa State's going to get through this game pretty easily. So, we don't really need to add much to the pick. I'm going to say Iowa State wins by 20. Here's a look at the Midwest region with my round of 32 picks, and I can kind of see where this bracket goes into a little bit of chaos because I can see Akron beating Texas Tech. I think that's going to be a really close game. I think the Santa Clara Kentucky game is going to be really close, and I can see Miami of Ohio or SMU beating Tennessee. And look at the road for Virginia having to go through Wright State. If Miami of Ohio wins that game, then they have them there. And maybe Kentucky beats Iowa State. it might be a pretty nice road for Virginia to get out to the Elite Eight and be pretty fresh going forward in the tournament. So we definitely got to look out for that. I do think Michigan's going to be able to get through this part of the bracket, but let's take a look at my predictions. And before we go, I wanted to share my predictions here for the winner, the runner-up, and a potential sleeper. I do think Michigan has the team to win. I was very disappointed with what I saw from them against Purdue today. Purdue just looked really, really good, but Michigan did not look great. So I was a little bit concerned there. I like their bracket though to get out to at least the Final Four, and then same thing with Florida. I like them to get out there. Obviously, Florida's going to have to beat Duke. That's going to be a little bit of a tall task for them, I think. I think they would also have to beat Houston as well. So, that would be a little bit of a tough path for them, but I could see them coming through. I love the guard play that we're starting to get from Florida. It's a little bit different from the guard play last year. I feel like last year was a little bit more athletic and aggressive. This year it's a little bit more finesse. So very interesting to see what we're going to get from the Florida Gators. And then as a sleeper, I kind of had trouble picking. I wanted to find a double-digit seed. And honestly, the only one that I felt confident in was USF. I feel like they have the athleticism to really compete with some of these teams and the size. And then they play with a really fast speed. So that's going to frustrate a lot of these teams. And it's going to help them hang with some of the bigger names that we see. So maybe South Florida to get through. They would run into, if they beat Louisville, they would run into a Michigan State team. And that might be a little bit tricky for them. But we'll have to see when we get to it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, share the video, share your picks in the comments. We're going to try to have a second round video out as soon as the first round games conclude, so definitely look out for that. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.